Okay, so, like, ready to hop in our time machine.
Always.
Let's rewind back to 1983.
1983.
Leg warmers, shoulder pads,
Big hair.
Thriller, playing, like, everywhere you go.
Classic.
But um, amidst all that, something kind of crazy happened. A U.S. invasion of this tiny island nation.
Most people probably couldn't even find it on a map.
Grenada.
Right. What's fascinating is how this whole Grenada thing, the invasion, it actually reflects like the huge global tensions of the Cold War.
Well, okay.
And it shows how complex the relationship was between the U.S. and the Caribbean.
It's a wild story, really. Revolutionaries, political intrigue.
International drama.
Whole shebang.
Yep.
And to really get it, we're going deep. Declassified documents, firsthand accounts.
We'll hear from Grenadians,
House.
people who are, right there in the middle of it all.
By the end, you'll get why this event still causes debates, even now.
Yeah.
And what it says about, like, global power, even today.
Yeah.
So before we get to the actual invasion, let's set the scene. Imagine Grenada before the revolution in '79.
Okay.
This small island nation.
Yep.
Long history of British colonialism,
Hmm.
dealing with poverty and social inequality.
Right, you have to understand that context to
Yeah.
see why so many Grenadians wanted change.
Exactly. And that's where Eric Gary comes in.
Okay.
He was Grenada's first prime minister after independence. But his rule, well, not exactly a walk in the park.
No, authoritarian tactics, a secret police force.
They called them the Mongoose Gang.
Yeah. Accusations of brutality, corruption. It was a recipe for disaster.
And then into this whole mess steps Maurice Bishop.
Look at Maurice Bishop.
This really charismatic, educated lawyer.
A powerful voice for the people.
He knew Gary's repression firsthand.
His own father was killed
Mm.
by Gary's secret police.
Yeah, so that really fueled his passion for justice.
Totally.
This drive to create a better future for Grenada.
Absolutely.
He co-founded the New Jewel movement, a political party inspired by Marxist ideas
Promising some radical change.
and social justice.
Right.
Now, when we say Marxist-inspired, it's important to, like, understand what that meant.
Yeah.
Think economic equality.
Worker ownership of resources.
Big emphasis on social welfare programs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These were at the heart of Bishop's vision.
His vision for Grenada.
And it resonated with a lot of Grenadians.
Oh, yeah.
They were tired of Gary and all the inequality on the island.
So on March 13th, 1979, Gary's out of the country.
Mm-hmm.
Bishop and the New Jewel movement seize power.
In a bloodless coup.
Yeah, this was huge.
Not just a change in leadership.
Right.
It transformed Grenada. Politically, socially, everything.
And at first, there was this, like, wave of optimism.
A lot of hope.
Bishop's government, they enacted all these reforms.
Increased wages for women.
Free education, healthcare.
Pushing for self-sufficiency.
Even started literacy programs.
Yeah.
Empowering those who couldn't get an education under Gary.
Right. All those reforms, especially the focus on, social welfare and equality, they directly challenged the traditional power structure.
Oh, yeah.
And the U.S. vision for the region. Don't forget, this is like peak Cold War.
Right.
The U.S. saw the world as like communism versus democracy.
Black and white.
Totally.
And then you've got Bishop being friends with Fidel Castro.
The leader of Cuba.
Communist Cuba.
That definitely didn't ease U.S. anxieties.
No.
They saw Castro as a Soviet puppet, basically.
So anyone connected to him was seen as a threat.
A threat to their interests in the Caribbean.
And then we've got this amazing woman, Decima Williams, coming into the picture.
Okay.
So, picture this. Young Grenadian graduate student in the U.S.
Uh-huh.
Suddenly, bam, she's appointed Grenada's ambassador to the UN.
After the revolution.
It's like a movie plot or something.
Right.
Thrown onto the world stage.
At this crazy moment in history.
Representing a nation undergoing this massive transformation.
Huge challenge.
Trying to do international diplomacy.
While also conveying the hopes of the Grenadian people.
Her perspective is so valuable.
It really is.
Helps us see the human side of this whole thing.
Right.
The personal stories happening against this backdrop of global politics.
But, while there's all this excitement and hope in Grenada, the U.S. government's getting more and more concerned. You see, the U.S. saw these reforms as like a domino effect.
Yeah.
They were worried that Bishop's whole message, racial equality, self-determination,
Yeah.
they thought it would resonate with Black Americans.
We were fighting for civil rights back home.
Exactly. And they were afraid it would lead to unrest, challenge the power structures.
So it wasn't just Grenada itself, it was about the bigger picture.
The ripple effects in
Yeah.
the region,
Yeah.
back in the U.S., everywhere. And this fear, it got, amplified when Reagan came into power.
Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, with his super strong anti-communist stance. Reagan saw the world in black and white, good versus evil. He even called the Soviet Union the evil empire.
Wow. So you can imagine how he viewed this tiny island nation, right?
With a socialist government.
And ties to Cuba.
It didn't fit into his worldview at all.
Then in '83, Bishop does something really bold.
What's that?
He goes to New York City
Oh, okay.
and gives this speech directly addressing the U.S. government's fears. He basically says, hey, you're scared of us because of racism.
He called them out.
Totally. He said they wanted to control the Caribbean.
It was a David and Goliath moment.
This tiny nation standing up to the most powerful country in the world.
It was risky.
And then you have the whole airport controversy.
Oh, right.
Grenada starts building a new airport
With a longer runway.
with help from Cuba.
Yeah.
Seems pretty normal for a country that wants more tourism,
Yeah.
trade.
Oh, you'd think so. But Reagan, he jumps on this. He says, see, they're building a Soviet military base.
Trying to scare everyone.
Totally. Using it to justify getting more aggressive with Grenada. But in reality, the airport was a normal size for international airports, and it was for civilian use.
There was no proof of what Reagan was saying.
Right. It's how these Cold War anxieties twisted everything, made people see things that weren't really there.
The airport became the symbol of the U.S. fear of communism spreading in the Caribbean.
It was all about control. And in the middle of all this pressure from the U.S., things start falling apart inside Grenada.
Oh.
Divisions within the New Jewel movement, some members like Bishop's deputy, Bernard Cord, they thought Bishop wasn't moving towards a communist state fast enough.
So it's like those classic struggles of any revolution.
Yeah, how do you balance those big ideals with actually running a country?
Keeping everyone united when there's so many different opinions. It's tough.
And in Grenada, those ideological differences, plus the pressure from the U.S., it created a powder keg.
So what happened?
In October '83, Cord and his group staged a coup. They put Bishop under house arrest.
Wow, so the revolution, all that hope, it was imploding.
It was a turning point. And things escalated really quickly. When people heard about Bishop being arrested, thousands took to the streets.
Demanding his release.
They marched to his house and freed him. It was like this spontaneous uprising.
Showing how much they love Bishop.
They marched towards Fort Rupert, the army headquarters, hoping to take back control.
But then what happened at the fort?
It's a tragedy. As Bishop and the crowd get closer to the fort, soldiers loyal to Cordu opened fire. Bishop, some of his ministers, and dozens of civilians were killed.
It's a reminder that revolutions, even when they start with good intentions, can turn violent. And this violence is what the U.S. used to justify what happened next.
Yeah, it's just heartbreaking, like all that hope ending in such a mess. And it's this mess that, well, the U.S. kind of uses for what happens next.
It really does. 6 days after Bishop's killed, October 25th, 1983, the U.S. launches this full-scale invasion, Operation Urgent Fury.
Reagan went on TV, right?
He did.
Announced the invasion. Gave two main reasons. Protecting American medical students, they were studying there.
And, stopping the violence. Bringing back order.
But there's another motive. That Cold War fear.
Stopping communism from spreading in the Caribbean.
Exactly. Reagan used the chaos in Grenada to flex his muscles, show the Soviet Union and Cuba they meant business.
It's amazing how fast things changed. 1 minute, Grenada is this small island with its own problems.
Right.
Then suddenly they're a huge threat to U.S. security, like a Soviet launching pad or something.
That's propaganda for you,
Yep.
Shaping the story to fit what they want.
And people in America, after Vietnam, they were ready to believe it.
A quick, decisive action to protect American interests. That's what they wanted to hear.
The invasion itself. Over in a few days. The U.S. military was just too strong. Overwhelmed the Grenadian and Cuban forces. But the impact, that lasted a lot longer.
It did. And in Grenada, people had mixed feelings.
Oh, yeah.
Some were glad the U.S. stepped in. They saw it as a rescue.
A rescue from who?
From the regimes that took over after Bishop. An end to the violence.
But others.
They felt betrayed. Their hopes for running their own country crushed.
Because of foreign power coming in.
Yeah. They saw it as the U.S. interfering again, like they'd done so many times in the Caribbean.
And for the people who believed in Bishop's revolution.
They felt it the most. They thought Grenada had been robbed of its chance to build their own society the way they wanted.
Decima Williams, the UN ambassador, she was really vocal about this, wasn't she?
Oh, yeah. She condemned the invasion, called it aggression, breaking international law. Her voice and so many other Grenadians, they challenged that simple story the U.S. was telling.
That they were the good guys.
Right. And that debate, it's still going on. Was it right to invade? Did it save lives, protect America? Or was it just taking advantage of a small country?
It's complicated, right? No easy answers.
Exactly. The Grenada invasion shows us that history isn't simple. It's messy, different viewpoints, consequences that last way longer than anyone expects.
And we always have to question what we're told.
Especially when it comes to war, we have to ask who benefits? What's the real story?
Wow. This whole deep dive has really made me think about global politics, revolutions, what the Cold War really meant.
It's a lot to unpack.
And I really hope everyone listening will keep exploring this. Read different accounts, learn about all the sides of the story, because understanding the past, it helps us make sense of the world today.
It's the only way to move forward.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.